In the mid-80s, while the world was still recovering from questionable haircuts and bell-bottom pants, Citroën decided to play the revolutionary. No more shaky do-it-yourself, no more hasty compromises. The AX arrives like a knight in light armor, a city car cut out for the urban jungle. A clever speedster that complements the Peugeot Société Anonyme stable without stepping on the toes of its cousin Peugeot. The 205, this diva that was already turning all heads? Today we look back at the history of this small car that is much more brilliant than it appears. At the time of the AX's design, there was no question of Citroën photocopying the 205 by sticking a different badge on it. Instead, the French engineers took a bold turn. The X will be an ode to lightness, sobriety, and practicality. And the price, a bargain, almost a gift. But don't be fooled. This is not one of those discount boxes that smell of cheap plastic and sadness. It will have some thin, cheap plastic that could rival cigarette paper in thinness. But more on that later. That said, the X has its own platform, gets the latest brand new engine from the group, the famous TU, and a philosophy all its own. A discreet car, certainly, but one that has managed to charm its audience and leave a mark in memories. A bit like an old song that we hum without really knowing why. In the early 1980s, Citroën's entry-level model was nearly incomprehensible. The Do CV, this venerable antique from 1948, was still dragging its feet, accompanied by its cousin Diane, who finally gave up the ghost in 1983. Beside it, there was the Elena, a Peugeot 104 disguised as a Citroën, and the Visa, another mutant from the same lineage that played the intermediaries under the GSA. And then there was also the Axle, a fiasco imported from Old Sayat that landed in 1984 to further confuse customers. In short, a real headache. Meanwhile, at Peugeot Société Anonyme, they were preparing two big moves. The BX in 1982, which smelled like the future, and the 205 in 83, which was going to become the sales queen we know. But there was a piece missing on the chessboard, a little warrior, to put some order back in the Citroën range without stealing the spotlight from the 205. It all began in 1980 with the ZA project, which later evolved into S9. Citroën draws from the ideas of the Eco 2000 program and launches a major reflection. We call the designers, we take out the pencils, we heat up the brains. Alias Burton, Art Blakesley at Talbot, Fergus Pollock, Trevor Fiore, everyone pitches in. At first we dream of something audacious, a monocore that could have been the Twingo before Renault got to it. But after showing that to a panel of customers, we quickly packed up the idea. Too weird, too risky, or simply too soon, perhaps? In the end, Trevor Fiore wins with a compact, classic, but clever design. The front face and lights wink at the BX, and its aerodynamics are particularly good. And it's not a coincidence. After the oil crisis of '79, French manufacturers, pushed by a state that acts like a strict teacher, rack their brains to consume less. At Citroën, Eco 2000 becomes the Bible and the AX is its model disciple. With a CX of 0.31, a featherweight of 640 kilograms, for the base version and modern engines, it displays a ridiculous consumption of 5 to 6 liters per 100. On the engine side, it's a party. Gone are the old asthmatic twin cylinders of the Deux Chevaux or the flat 4 cylinders of the Axle. The AX introduces the TU engine, a little marvel signed Peugeot Société Anonyme, available in 3 flavors. 31 feet and 3 inches, -3 and 45 HP for the cautious, 1 quart and 55 HP for the sensible, or 1,360 cubic centimeters and 65 horsepower for those who want a little pep. Unveiled in October '86 at the Paris Motor Show, it comes in 3 doors and in 6 versions of the 10E Basic, like a baguette without salt, without crust, and without crumb, to the 14TZS, a little more upscale. To spice things up, Citroën releases the Xantia concept, a beefed-up AX, and calls on Jacques Seguela, the king of advertising, for a completely crazy campaign, the AX on the Great Wall of China. The beginnings are decent, but not dazzling. In '87, it takes off slowly until the AX Sport, a little fury of 95 horses, comes to ignite the powders. Only 5,000 copies, a rarity for thrill seekers. Then come the 5 doors, the Visa takes its bow, the axle agonizes in a corner, and so much the better. Result 238,562 units sold at the end of the year. In 1,988, a Gran Turismo muscle version, the diesel range arrives with a 1.4 liter of 53 horses, and the AX blows up the counters, 330,000 copies. In 1989, it peaks with 390,157 units. Even if, let's be honest, the 205 remains the boss with 565,830 sales. But like any star, the AX eventually shows wrinkles. In 90, sales are flagging, so in 91, it is given a facelift. Not enough to counter the Renault Clio, nor the Peugeot 106, which, ironically, steal the platform of the X. A 4x4 version and a Grand Tourer injection of 100 horses try to restart the machine. But in 92, the engine switched to injection, lose a bit of punch. And the exclusive with its leather and its flashy rims remains a rarity. In 93, the range simplifies by following the example of the Xantia with the XSX and 5SX finishes, and the special series rain down like Kawe, Thalassa, Vulcan Confetti, and many others. In 95, the X is reduced to 3 models, and in 96, the Saxo has become the inexpensive, aging car that we call in for repairs. In 1998, after precisely 2,425,138 units, it takes its bow, permanently replaced by the Saxo. So is the X a legend? Maybe not, but hell of a car. Sober, simple, cheap. It did everything. From the Dix E for the stingy, to the Grand Tourer injection for the driving fanatics, through the 4x4s and the diesels. It has seduced the young, the old, the broke, the clever, the men, the women, the companies, the communities, and even Malaysia. Because at the beginning of the 90s, Proton, this small Malaysian manufacturer who until then was content to regurgitate Mitsubishi like a tired photocopier, decides to come out of its shell. Proton wants something new, fresh, daring. And where does it go for inspiration? To Peugeot Société Anonyme. Initially, Proton had its eye on the Peugeot 306, but they lowered their ambitions, and instead, in 1995, they set their sights on the Citroën A-X. For Peugeot Société Anonyme, it's a windfall to profit from a car that has long been profitable, and for Proton, it's an opportunity to carve out a place in the sun in the market for modern small cars. A field totally dominated by Perodua. So what does Proton do? They take the X, give it a coat of paint, a bit of mascara, and rename it Tiara. Slightly restyled to blend into the Proton family, it retains the small 1.1-liter, 60-horsepower engine. The problem is that the Tiara is too different from the rest of the Proton range. And its "I'm not from here" look confuses everyone. And as if that wasn't enough, Proton and Peugeot Société Anonyme sign a diabolical pact prohibiting the export of the Tiara, so it's stuck in Malaysia. Sales start off timidly, peaking in 1997 with 14,000 units, but it's still far from the target of 20,000 per year. Sales plummet and start in 1999. After painfully selling a total of 30,000 units, Proton gives up and the Tiara is withdrawn from sale. In any case, for us, the AX has marked its era, and no doubt you inevitably have a story more or less related to it, so tell me that in the comments. And, of course, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss all our new videos.